you are gonna see some cool ass shit.
Yeah, you don't want two Flavor Flays.
Heart transplants, brain surgeries. I've seen it all.
Dude, that's fucking dope.
Walk up and just get it, whatever it is.
Yeah, brother.
I'm trying not to laugh, bro, but Josh is fucking killing me.
Well, guess what Navy SEALs do, motherfucker? They communicate and they're on the same fucking page.
Whoa. Aaron, he's got the vest. Welcome, everybody, to the Happy Hoodlums podcast. It's your hosts, Kemper and Zach, and we have a very special guest all the way from down under. We have Mr. Michael Johnson, a.k.a. Mojo himself. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Mike is one of the best freaking mindset coaches in the world. And I would say you're definitely in top 5, top 3 of all of Australia, would you say?
Hard to say. I mean, look, every guru, whether they're like day one of coaching into the industry, they think that they're number one. But look, I've been doing this for 19 years. So, I've spent millions of dollars, worked with the best people on the planet, worked with rich listers, professional athletes, sporting teams. So I don't know. You can make it. Depends. You make your decision whether I'm number one or number 2 or number 3 or whatever after this podcast.
Hey, you got the chops, okay? You're number 1 in our book, so we're just gonna start off strong.
Doing
that
something
shit
right.
for the happy Hoodlums. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, I was watching some of your podcasts and I did take some notes. So I got some things that I want to jump into. But first, I like to start with who you were as a kid. How'd you find your way into the coaching space?
It's a long story, but to quickly run through it, I wasn't the best at school. Got kicked out of school when I was 15 for fighting. I'm a redhead, so I had bright red hair, freckles. I had pasty skin. I used to get picked on a lot, and my parents thought it would be a good idea to put the angry redheaded kid in boxing classes. And there was a few kids who used to pick on me a little bit. And one day I decided I'd had enough and beat the shit out of the bully, and got expelled from school. When that happened, I just fell into this downward spiral of, I guess you could say these days, mental health. But I just felt shit about life. I knew that I was in trouble at home all the time. I was in trouble at school. I couldn't please my parents. And so I was about to end my own life. And when that happened, I realized that the only person that I could live for was me. And the only person that I could make happy was me, and that it was an inside job. So that was sort of my first insight into life, was realizing that I couldn't please other people. That's not what I was here for. I ended up going back to school, finished off high school, and decided to become a diesel fitter or a diesel mechanic working on heavy mining equipment, and got an apprenticeship with Caterpillar here in Australia. Did that, and while I was there, I was about 2 years or so in, and my best friend's 3-year-old niece was killed in a car accident. I just remember this little white coffin going into the ground, thinking, how can life just be taken away just like that? Like, you're here one day and you go on the next. And in that moment where I was at the funeral watching the coffin going into the ground, I realized that life can be taken away in a split second. But these questions popped into my head. What's the purpose of my life? Why am I here? Why do I exist? And how am I going to be remembered when I'm not here? They were sort of like the real fundamental questions that I'd never even really considered at that age. And it just stuck on my mind for a while. At work, I realized that most people were working just to make money. They complained about their job. They complained about their partner. They complained about their kids. They complained about the money they were making. And a lot of them were going up, working in mining sites and making a lot of money. And so they were making, almost quadruple the average income, and they were still complaining about how shit their life was. Now, I was taught from a young age that you go to school, get good grades so you can get a good education. And if you get a good education, you either go to university or you get a good job. And somehow that was going to lead to this great life of the house with the white picket fence and the married and the kids and all of that sort of shit. And when I was there, I realized that was a complete myth. It was non-true. And all these guys had all the money and they had everything, but they still were miserable. So I started thinking about what I would rather do in life. And at the time, the only place that made me feel good was going to the gym and exercising. This was 20 years ago now. The personal training industry wasn't a serious industry. it was really full of Arnold Schwarzenegger wannabes, the old juice junkies of the early 2000s, who wanted to be like, Ronnie Coleman and Lee Priest and all of those big guys. Um, or it was sort of the aerobics Les Mills sort of days. And so personal trainers weren't really taken seriously. We were just idiots that were unqualified in a gym, just lifting heavy shit. And so that's how we're taken by the health industry and the medical professional or the medical industry. And so I got signed off my apprenticeship or my traineeship as a mechanic. And I decided that was it. I was going to quit my apprenticeship and go and become a personal trainer. I started studying night school, which scared the shit out of me because I wasn't that good at school. I was put into special classes, told that I had dyslexia. I just wasn't good at school. And so going back and studying scared the absolute crap out of me. I was so afraid because I thought I'd be judged, criticized, and that I automatically assumed I was going to fail. But when I got in there, I was a straight A student. And anyway, when I quit my apprenticeship, I was halfway through becoming a personal trainer doing night school. And I went to the local gym and I said, look, give me a job. I'll clean toilets. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance. And so they had the availability to work on the desk scanning barcodes when people would come in. They'd have a little card with a barcode on the back. And I would scan it and they would come into the gym. After about 2 months to 3 months, the boss came to me and he said, look, everyone in here knows you. Like when all the mums come in the morning, you talk to them all, their kids' names. Oldies that would come in at 11 o'clock in the morning and go and do strength for life or over 50s. They would sit around and have coffees and stuff with me. So I knew all of them. And then I would go and train with most of the like bodybuilders and the big guys and girls after I'd finish my shift in the afternoon. I'd help them. I'd spot them. I'd go clean up the gym. I was there from pretty much 6 a.m. until 9 o'clock at night. And I just loved it. I loved the environment. I loved the supporting community or the supportive community. And the boss came to me and he said, look, if you don't tell anyone you're not qualified, everyone here knows that you're good at what you do. You love this stuff. You've got a lot of knowledge. Because I actually, once I started studying, I realized I was really good at it. And that when I study something that I love and I enjoy, I just, go all in on it. So I probably have that ADHD mentality where when I put my mind to something, I'm hyper focused. But outside of that, I'm like completely unfocused. So I just hyper focused in on it. And I studied a shitload and I got really, really good, really, really quick. I was learning from my boss who mentored me and a couple of other PTs as well. I got mentors early on. And then I just started training people. So I wasn't even qualified and I was training people. And then, I started working in that industry. Obviously, I got qualified and I just kept studying. Studied high performance kinesiology through the Czech Institute, started studying nutrition. I was doing that for a while. Fitness First came to Adelaide, which is where I'm from. They poached me and headhunted me to come and work for them. And I ended up getting poached after a year of working at Fitness First to go and work in a medical center where I wanted to learn off of doctors and physios and chiropractors and psychologists and so on. So I started running my own training facility in a medical center and I'd do a lot of physical rehab. And it was when I was in there, I realized that everybody knows what to do. They just don't fucking do it. And it all has to do with what goes on in between their ears. And so that's what led me to study mindset and mental performance. And that was about 13, 14 years ago now. So it's been a bit of the journey. That's how it started.
Oh man. So there's some nuggets in there. I definitely want to go into the mindset segue, but just as a little, tidbit for people, likability is a life skill. And you can actually leverage that into whatever field you prefer. Like when you got into the gym, you had that good energy that you were putting off. And that's actually, I was talking with Zach last podcast we did about being a good host. If you can learn how to be a host through an experience, all of a sudden you open up the doors for people to learn from you. And there's such a beauty of where you have a comfortable learning environment so you can push yourself uncomfortably through the process, right? It's
100%.
like having a net under you while you're tightrope walking, right?
Yeah.
Much better.
Yeah.
The other thing I was gonna say, my grandfather was a bodybuilder, and it's kind of funny how history repeats itself. because he was a silver era bodybuilder, and they were
Mhm.
severely looked down upon before the
Mm.
Mr. Olympias came out. And this was in the Great Depression. And so after during that time, they would have to sneak onto construction sites, steal the concrete and rebar, pop holes in coffee cans, and mix the concrete in there to make weights. And those were their original barbells and stuff. And now you fast forward where people thought they were idiots, and we come to like pre and post COVID, and it's like, well, now we're kind of in a sense the doctors for most people, because not everyone is going to be able to afford high quality medical care. And can you really trust it at a certain point when they don't know what's going on above them?
Yeah,
Interesting time.
it's definitely swung around. I mean, that was part of what made me go and work in a medical center because I wanted to learn and I wanted to bridge that gap between the healthcare industry, the medical industry, and personal training as well. So that's how I started getting into public speaking or going out and running events. The gym that I originally worked at, I helped them set up a franchise system. So then I started going out and training other personal trainers on how to integrate into the healthcare industry, how to use things like physiotherapists, how to do rehab. And so it was really cool. But that's how I got my foot in the door. Now it's cool to see how far the industry's come, that personal trainers are part of a person's health journey, not separate to it. So it's really cool now that that opportunity's there. I mean, look, any industry has shitheads in it. So, there are definitely a bunch of idiots in the personal training industry, but there's idiots in every industry. But I think overall, the personal training industry is actually taken a lot more seriously. People now go to personal trainers, which seems to be a common or a semi-normal thing. It wasn't when I first started. If you had a personal trainer, you probably were either rich or you had high levels of disposable income. It wasn't sort of a normal thing that people even really thought about. So it's cool.
Yeah. And in terms of the mindset stuff, so in my own journey, when I was rehabbing myself, I was very broken after this car accident, and I found myself really depressed, and I was getting out of being bedridden. A whole bunch of crap happened to me. And I found this book called Psycho Cybernetics. Have you ever read that
Um,
book?
Maxwell Maltz, is that the one?
Yep.
Yep.
That blew the doors off of my mind because I did not understand how the subconscious worked.
Hmm.
And you mentioned people know what to do, they don't know how the hell to get themselves to do it.
Hmm.
And um, can you go into where you think goal setting is flawed and why?
Yeah. Look, I don't know that goal setting itself as a whole is flawed, but I think that the way most people approach it. So I'll go through a bunch of different fields, scientific fields, and give you different insights because I think that I mean, online, I like to push buttons, and so you can be very black and white in your opinion because it pisses people off, and it helps me get more views. But the real truth is that when you dive into things, the majority of life is a gray area with shades of like black and white at either ends, but most of it's gray. And there's always exceptions to the rules. One of the greatest scientists in history, Albert Einstein, said today's facts are tomorrow's fiction. So, I think you've got to keep an open mind. When you look at some of the greatest philosophers throughout history, have had a very philosophical view with a scientific base. And so when you have those two, you question everything, you ask a lot of questions, but at the same time, you try to verify the thoughts or the theories that you have. So when it comes to goal setting, I normally take it from the approach of let's look at the mentality behind goal setting. So, first of all, when someone is more black and white in their thinking, where they're very fundamental in their thinking, very much animalistic. You may have heard of the area of the brain called the limbic system or the emotional system. Sometimes you'll hear it called the amygdala, but that's just part of the limbic system. When we're emotional, what tends to happen is we oscillate between this black and white way of thinking. So things are either good or bad, they're right or wrong, but that gives you that black and white thinking. So when people tend to set goals at that level, when they tend to be highly emotional and governed by that part of the brain, which is the more primitive part of the brain. It's not the most evolved part of the brain, it's the more primitive part of the brain. And connection is a survival response. So our emotional system helps us to connect with others. The problem with that is that sometimes if you're in the wrong group, that can cause problems. If you've been in the wrong environment, that can cause problems. And most people don't grow up in an environment where highly developed, highly intellectual people with high IQs are around the place. So most of us grow up in an environment where we're around, I guess you could say, more primitive thinkers. That's why the news works so well, right? Because it triggers people. Someone dies in a plane crash and it's tragedy as the headline. But the truth is, there's 8 billion people on the planet. One plane crash, 2 people died. Who gives a fuck? Like, it's irrelevant. But it's relevant in the news because people react to that shit because they're emotional, right? And so it triggers their emotions. Now, at that level of thinking when it comes to goal setting, most people have fundamental ideas about goal setting. So they go, right, I've got a goal. I'm going to go and set this goal, whether it's realistic or not, whether you've got data to back up the fact that you're going to achieve it or not. I'm going to set this goal and I'm going to carve it in concrete. Now, the problem with that way of thinking is that most people don't hit their goals. And if you set goals and don't achieve them for long enough, then you just give up on them. Or you keep putting yourself under pressure, which triggers huge amounts of anxiety. It can be huge amounts of stress. Now, if we have a look at the impact of stress and anxiety and stuff on our health and our brain, it doesn't make people operate more effectively. So you've got all of these consequences of setting ineffective goals. Now, most people also don't know this, but when you're elated or you're in a high emotional state that is erratic or elated. So if we look at average, you've got a balance point in our psychology. Now, my way of thinking is balanced thinking is where we want to be. We don't want to be positive. We don't want to be negative. In fact, I think positive thinking is bullshit. And the reason why I say that is because anything in the universe that has a positive charge has to balance itself with a negative charge. And they're both the same thing. You can't have one without the other. Ancient Chinese philosophy spoke about this in the yin yang principle. If you go study physics, if you go study physics, or you even type in net charge of the universe, just Google it, it will come up and it'll say 0, because all positive charges in the universe have to balance to 0. And also, if you go study chemistry, every atom is trying to go to its most stable form. So if you have, let's say, hydrogen, the first atom, I guess you could call it, or compound, or whatever you want to call it, on the periodic table, it is highly explosive because it has an unbalanced outer shell. Whereas when you go to the balanced shells, they are called the noble gases. So when we're noble, we're more balanced and stable. When we're volatile, we're unstable. So there are these principles that are intertwined into science. So now, when you take a person who is highly emotional, who elates themselves and gets excited, when you're excited, you decrease or decompress timeframes in your own mind and you over-exaggerate your skill set. So what will happen is when people are hyperactive and they get all juiced up and they fist pumping the air and they have this big goal and this big dream, they tend to believe that they're more competent and more skilled than they actually are. And that causes you to compress timeframes. So what will happen is you'll set an ineffective goal with a too short a time frame with a high level of competence, which you don't have or don't possess. So then it's going to put more pressure on you. It's going to trigger stress and anxiety. And you're going to be one of those people like I used to be that run around, you fucking erratic all the time. You're trying to achieve a heap of shit. And that's how you operate, right? The other alternative is that if you're out of balance and you're depressed, when you're depressed, the opposite happens, where you under exaggerate or depreciate your skill set and you think that you're never good enough and you're never going to achieve anything and it's going to take forever. And so you overexpand your timeframes. So people who are depressed or who have more negative emotions, they are going to over-exaggerate how long things are going to take. And also they're going to feel like they don't have the competence or they don't have the skills and they don't back themselves. And then if you're elated and excited in your emotional state or hyperactive or anything like that, you will over-exaggerate your skill set, compress timeframes, and put too much pressure on yourself to achieve. And so those two things are super common when you're goal setting. So you're better off to be balanced in your goal setting and be calm and stable, and then set effective goals based on past data. And then what a goal really is it's based on probabilities. What we're saying is based on past data and based on past evidence, if we continue on this trajectory, we're likely to achieve this goal, but it's a probability. It's not a guaranteed. People who are black and white fundamental thinkers who tend to run off of their emotions, they're gonna carve this goal in stone. They're going to achieve it. It has to be done. And then when they're not getting there, they're going to start beating themselves up, feeling like shit, thinking that they're incompetent, getting depressed, feeling crap about themselves. But the truth is, I don't know the future. No one else knows the future. So when we're setting goals, all we're doing is we're going based on past data. This is a probability or a likelihood that it might happen, but we have to keep adjusting those probabilities because the economy might change, government regulation might change. There could be a whole lot of humans spook really easy, and human behavior is really obvious, but it's a pain in the ass because the media comes out with one thing, people get spooked for like 3 or 4 weeks, and so like in business, everything's going well, the trajectory's going in the right direction. Government comes out, says that interest rates might go up, people freak the fuck out, and then for 4 weeks, almost everything just goes to shit. Now, you didn't put that in your forecasting, so you got to change the goal. You just got to adapt. But most people aren't willing to adapt. So that's why goal setting can be flawed. So you got to be more balanced and stable when you set goals, and it's based on probabilities and past data. That's really all it is.
You killed that. I want to touch on a couple things in there. One, I think it's really interesting that we aren't taught much about hormonal responses, yet it governs so much of our thought processes.
Yep.
And so when you talk about us being triggered and not having access to like our prefrontal cortex where that higher thinking is, so many of us are hijacked by our own system, and we're not doing the things that will help us have a chemical buffer to the triggers in our lives. And it causes us to live these erratic experiences rather than a more pleasant, balanced experience. And it's led me to the whole positive charge attracting a negative circumstance has led me to this understanding that conflict is a gateway to resolution. And so when you're getting this positive boost in your life and you start going in that direction, I think just being mindful that a problem isn't necessarily a problem. It's a challenge and a solution for a problem you're not yet encountering. Because each thing is progressive and it's going to stack on top of the next thing. It's like when you get a shitty job and you're like, I had no clue that this job of me being at the front desk was going to be the intro to me being able to talk to anybody. Why? Because I just discovered who I am, and sharing what I love is something I'm passionate about, that now all of a sudden you have the courage to learn. And then later on in your journey, it's like, oh, I'm doing that same thing. Now I'm just on a stage rather than behind a desk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But being that you're in a different part of the world, I thought it would be great because you've worked with people from all around the world because you're high freaking level. And I was curious, what do Australians wrestle with that Americans don't in their approach to like their setbacks in their lifestyle and maybe in their mindset? Have you noticed a big difference or any commonalities?
Yeah, I think humans are pretty predictable. There are definitely differences. Like, I think country by country, there are predictable patterns as well. In Australia, we are very regulation and rule based. In Australia, something happens and like a child runs out in front of a car on a highway, and our government says, well, we better reduce all the speed limits because it's better for safety. I think Americans, if you do that shit, there's probably going to be a fair bit of trouble. Someone's going to get shot, which is pretty fucking cool. I think Americans do that really, really well, which is, I look, I can't really say. I can only say this from an outside perspective. I have been to America a couple of times, but I haven't spent too much time over there. I'm heading over in September for a bit of a tour and for a bunch of podcasts and stuff. What I have noticed, especially with friends who live in America, clients who live in America, there seems to be this press against government regulation and needing to oversight everything. Whereas in Australia, Australians, I think, love rules, love regulation. Even though they'll complain about it and bitch and moan, no one will fucking do anything about it. You know, in Australia, there's a state in Australia, not where I'm from. We had like 2 weeks of lockdowns. I was super lucky during COVID because we just bought a new house, this house here. I got a whole library in here. I got a gym, a full like CrossFit gym in my house. I've got a coffee machine, enough food to last me for a fucking while. Wicked TV, good internet. So like when they said lockdowns, I'm like, I couldn't give a fuck anyway. I hardly leave the house if I don't have to, so it doesn't bother me. But a lot of my mates, you know, they couldn't go to the gym, they couldn't exercise. And then there's a state in Australia called Victoria. In Victoria, they almost had 12 months of lockdowns where they weren't able to go more than a couple of kilometers outside of their house. I think that
Damn.
if that happened in places like Texas, be a whole bunch of politicians getting fucking shot. So, you know, which I think is I can't say it's cool because you know death isn't cool anyway. But I think that there's something with Americans and the British and a lot of European countries where they just don't like being fucked with. Like in France, if you fuck with the French too much, they literally just go in and overthrow the government and then they just put a new government in. And I think that's pretty cool because really that's what people are there for. Like we vote for people to look after us. But I think in a lot of countries around the world now, people are getting into power. They're fucking with the population. They're doing whatever they want to do, even if it's against the population. So I think I see some of that. But look, I don't think there's too much of a difference. You know, I'm sure in America there's a whole bunch of lazy motherfuckers that don't want to do anything and think that they're entitled to a whole bunch of shit that they're not entitled to because they're not doing anything. There's a whole bunch of probably averages that just sort of do just enough to get by and to have a holiday once a year and to, you know, just
Well,
survive. And then there's probably a bunch of people out there who are crushing it and smashing goals and want to do better for themselves and things like that. They're the people I like working with. I don't give a fuck if they start from rock bottom. I don't care if they're halfway up the totem pole, and I don't care if they're at the top. If you ain't pushing, you're not living. So that's my philosophy. So they're the people I like working with. But look, Australia has that. We have a whole bunch of entitled, lazy motherfuckers that don't want to do anything, right through to super driven people. What's interesting though is that a lot of Australians who want to crush it normally go to America or head overseas.
interesting. People are people. It's that month-long vacation or whatever that they be giving you guys. But I can tell you this much, man. During the pandemic, I had a very strange experience because nothing changed for me except having to wear a mask. And people kept telling me crazy shit because I was selling weed and weed was considered like an essential business. So I was like single-handedly decreasing domestic violence statistics and also dropping IQs, you know, because it was crazy how much like the stimulus package came through. People got like $1,000 a couple times and they bought hella weed. Like they were like, fuck a book, Mojo. I'm buying some ganja. I need a book of some J papers. We're going to town. Netflix, here I come. But yeah, man, people are people. I think in terms of the rebellious side of things, especially you mentioned like France, dude, we've been told that we're free and to be proud. That is a combination that when you try to suppress it, you will get erratic responses, right? Because you've now violated someone's identity. And on a spiritual level, we're all inherently free. We're only bound by our limitations mentally. And I think that's what's so beautiful about, you know, being a coach is learning how to take somebody who knows that's in here. They can't turn it off and move those beliefs out of the way, or rather than moving limiting beliefs, finding something that is so powerful inside of them, so meaningful that, you know, you would call it a driver, right? That it will drive them to perform at a higher level because they know it's do or die. So do you want to get into kind of like lifestyle change a little bit and how drivers work in people's psyche?
Yeah. Something you said there, like I'd love to touch on. There was a couple little key points that if you don't mind, I'll go off on some tangents and then come back to that question because it's sick. But you mentioned limiting beliefs. I always have this question because like the coaching industry and the psychology industry talk about this idea of limiting beliefs. But my question is, what makes a belief limiting? No one can really answer that. because my belief is I was a kid who was picked on at school. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I got kicked out of school. And look, all the time I doubt myself. You know, yesterday I was in the gym training, and I've had a motherfucker of a month. Like, you know, I've got some big shit happening, but like at the moment, I've got new staff members starting. The company's flat out. We're onboarding heaps of clients. It's just there's so much shit that's going on. You know, I think last night I got like 3.5, maybe 4 hours worth of sleep. And so, you know, yesterday I had like a lot of self-doubt. Some things hadn't worked out. And then yesterday I just had that day where I just woke up and I was like, this is fuck. Nothing's working out. Cash flows like coming in and going out super quick. I've got this big trip planned to the US as well, where, you know, I'm getting on some of these big podcasts and stuff. I need a heap of cash to do that. And so I was starting to have a lot of doubt and probably a lack of self-confidence, maybe even a lack of self-esteem, you could call it. If you look up the etymology of the word or the history of the meaning of the word. And so it was just, I don't know, it all sort of came to a head yesterday morning, and I was just bummed out and feeling shit. Anyway, it was like maybe 1 o'clock, and I've got a personal trainer who comes to my house twice a week. He was a young guy that I trained when I was working in the gyms, but he went on to be like one of the top CrossFit athletes here in where I'm from and stuff like that. Super healthy guy, super fit. And so he comes and trains twice a week with me. And anyway, he rocked up and we started doing some front squats, and I couldn't really be bothered. I was a bit tired. But all of a sudden, I just got in this groove, and I'm front squatting, and I added 30 kilos yesterday on my front squat. Now, I'm a pretty strong dude. To add 30 on, like, something just flipped inside of my head. It was like I had to prove something to myself. And I'm not in a strength phase. So, like, you know, if I'm in a strength phase and cranking it up quick, maybe that could happen, or having a couple of weeks off or whatever. But this was like, we're going like add a 10 on, add another 10, add another 10, and it just kept going and kept going and kept going. So I'm maxed out on my heaviest front squat that I've ever really tried to push for. And afterwards, I just placed the bar up in the rack, and I walked outside outside of the gym at my house, and all of a sudden I just got this big flush of emotion, and I just started, like, tears started running down my face. I was just sitting there, and it was like my whole brain just fucking rejigged itself. The reason why I'm coming to this is because people will label things as negative beliefs, but what essentially makes it negative? Sometimes it's the self-doubt and shit like that that's not negative. It's just for you to find your own worth again. And yesterday it was just that squat that just popped into my head, and I thought everything that I've committed myself to, I've always fucking achieved. The only thing that stops me from doing that is a lack of consistency and a lack of focus. And I've been super focused and heaps consistent. If I just stick at it, it will work. And it was just that rejig that I just needed in my head. So I wouldn't necessarily classify these things as limiting beliefs. They're only limiting why we believe that it's limiting. They might just be a belief. That's it. Now, the belief might be that I'm not good enough, but it's like, well, fucking prove it. Because if I can prove that I'm not good enough, I can probably prove that I'm enough as well at the same time. So how do we utilize that?
So you just got into something that I love talking about, and I've been saying it for a while, but when I go into the gym, I lift until I cry. Like, I seek to get into that space because there's so many aspects of life that you feel helpless to control that make you question your worth. Like, am I going to get it? Right? And it's the ability to affect change in a positive way. And the activity is just a means to do that. You know, and I think that's what's so beautiful about the gym and why it can be used to bring you to that inner crossroads. Because really, life is like a spiral, right? So my mom said some cool shit to me when I was little. She asked me, how do you find yourself? I said, I don't know. She said, we all walk to the edge of the light that we see and are forced to take the next step into darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you find yourself. And life is like a spiral staircase. And the edge of the light that you see, you think you master it on this level, and it just takes you to the next level. And the stakes are higher, but it's all an illusion. You're doing the same thing. Again, you're just having to step into darkness. And what it's really reaffirming is your infinite ability and faith and reason to believe in yourself. And this is all like the high stakes, it's all up here. And you get to this point where you go, fuck it. I figured out like the only way that I was happy when I was younger was when I was really trying. So it's like, I just got to try. I got nothing to lose. I knew there is a level of contentment I can experience at any level of the game as long as I'm still trying, as long as I'm still believing. And
Yeah.
I think that's what people are selling themselves short of because they put this time restriction on it and they lose why they're doing what they're doing in the first place. When you really find something you love, time is irrelevant. If you will die for it and live for it and act in every moment for it, you'll get it and you'll get there. And so it's beautiful. Like, I love talking to people that are higher and higher level. And that's why I'm so appreciative of you being on today, because your journey is like the message for other people. It's the message from a farther along place, but it's really able to connect with them right where they're at because they're just trying to do what you're doing. And you're going, come here, check this out. Check this out. I get worried too. And it's so dope that you're on here saying, man, I had a shit day. Man, I was kind of lost, even though I have everything that I could like want at this phase, you know? Materialistic wise from the outside looking in, right? People see the cars and the cool stuff and
I mean, that's all an illusion and a delusion. Like, I get that every week. I'm out somewhere and someone comes up and they're like, oh, you're lucky because you got your supercars and stuff like that. But look, I think they're fucking awesome because I grew up with cars. My dad builds custom cars for a hobby. Like, he's always built hot rods and show cars and shit like that. Like, he builds crazy stuff, Harleys, and he's a builder. He's always playing with his hands. And so, like, I've just grown up around cars. And for me, I've always had cars that are my thing. And so, like, both of my cars, they're supercars, but like my McLaren has a full Vorsteiner kit on it, one-off custom rims. So, it's got 21-inch rims on the back, which it comes out with 19s, I think. And then it's got 19s on the front. They're full custom. Like, I scratched one of the rims and I put it through for insurance, and it took like 3 months to get it because I'd fully custom make it at Vorsteiner to get the custom built rims. So, my cars are like, well, for me, cars are art. So I can go somewhere and someone rocks up in like, in Australia, we have, I know that they are over in America, but they're called Holden Commodores. And Holden is like a Chevy. They were a subsidiary of Chevy, but they're in Australia. And someone will rock up in like this 20-year-old Holden, which was cool when I grew up. Like, my mates had them. We used to do burnouts and stuff in them and just, do crazy shit in them. And someone rocks up and they're like, oh man, my car's not as good as yours. And I'm like, to me, I think it's just as fucking cool because it brings back all those memories. So, like, I love seeing people with their cars because it's a form of art and it's an expression of themselves. The same as like clothing and shit like that. Like, some people like stuff, some people don't. I go to all these car shows and there's all like these insecure fuckwits that all walk around and they're like, oh man, I can't believe that they put those rims. I wouldn't do that. And it's like, man, you couldn't even afford the car. Shut the fuck up. Like, I just don't know why people walk around and they point out what they would do and what they wouldn't do if they had a car like that. The thing is that they don't have the car like that. So just shut the fuck up and appreciate it for what it is, which is someone else's self-expression. And so, like, I don't care whether someone parks, a $2 million car next to me, or there's, a $500 Toyota next to me that, someone's put crazy rims on and cut the springs out of and cut half the exhaust off. It sounds like a truck as it goes past. Like, I just think that shit's cool because it just makes me laugh. Like, it just reminds me of the stuff that I used to do when I was young. And so, like, I mean, it gives me tingles. I don't know. I like the thing that I've studied, right, is I study greatness, and there is greatness in all different things. Like, you can't compare a high level NBA basketball like a Kobe Bryant. You can't compare him to a Matt Fraser or a Tia Claire Toomey from CrossFit. You can't compare them to a Bill Gates. They have similar patterns in the way that they think. They have similar patterns in their own self-belief and their own views. So they have these similar patterns, but you can't compare them. Like, people compare Kobe to Michael. It's like, yeah, but you can't. They're a different era. Shit changes all the time. People compare the golden era of bodybuilding in the year 2000 to now. It's a completely different sport. Like I don't know. I think people create these like silly comparatives because it makes them feel better. But at the end of the day, you're comparing the number one in something to the number one in something. And I think a lot of people compare what they have to what others have, which make them insecure and shit. Like, I don't know. I'm just proud of myself for the journey that I came on. Like, I was a dropkick shithead that was probably either going to end up one of two things, being a great entrepreneur or being in jail. My grandma said it to me. She's like, you're going to end up rich or you're going to end up in jail. One of those two things. And I was like, oh, I decided which one I wanted. My best friend, though, he ended up in jail. So he got done for major drug importation. So
Dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. That was, me, and it's always been my story. That's why we named the podcast the Happy Hoodlums podcast. It's like, I was looking at a bank during COVID and someone had spray painted love rules across the boards that had covered it up. And I was like, that's what we fucking need. We need more happy hoodlums, right? People that are still like, that saw this and was like, fuck that, bro. That's a dope canvas. But then just decided to make something positive out of it. And because my life could have went a crazy direction, I was in the streets selling tons of, weed and shit and running around doing stupid shit. And my best friend was actually murdered when I was 19. And that's what sent me massively down this, course of wanting to learn how to save people's lives. And, because I felt like this is the greatest man that I ever met. Like, he was a man at like 14, 15, like genuinely the most talented dude in all areas, resourceful and all that. So, but I was like, if this could happen to him, like we're losing the greats and it's unnecessary. And I was like, all right. So that kind of sent me on this conquest. But one thing I've noticed in life is whether you call something beautiful or ugly, it exists outside of that definition.
Mm.
The only thing that changes is how you interact with it. And I think that the more that people can take that philosophy towards their own life and realize maybe I'm just mislabeling this because I'm unwilling to experience it for what it is, but they'll get more out of the experience in the long run if they immerse themselves, because you're just going to emit this frequency that draws to you another situation to try and teach you this lesson. So the more present that you can be and understand that like pain is an indicator of growth that exceeds your ability to adapt in this current moment, right? And that's, I don't know where I'm going with that, but that is something that I've been like really flirting with when I've been at the gym lately. Is like, oh, so this pain is just an indicator. I don't get mad at my car when it tells me it's almost empty. I'm appreciative of this indicator that I need to go somewhere to refuel.
Yeah, there's something called on that definition. If you look up distress and eustress, which is EU stress, distress. The definition of distress is not being able to adapt to current circumstances or environment. Then you have eustress, which is beneficial stress, which is someone who has the ability to adapt to a changing environment. And so, what we all want as humans is maximum eustress, because when I've studied things like biology and we can just go into biology, but if you and even physics, everything in nature grows. But if you have a look at what growth is actually stress. So we want to grow our muscles, got to stress them. Trees grow the deepest roots in the harshest droughts. That's one of the quotes that I say in my events. So everything in nature has maximum growth under stress. And it's normally some form of adversity or challenge. That's where it grows. A lawn that gets watered all the time, the roots are so superficial that if you forget to water it for a couple of days, the lawn dies. If you're used to watering it sort of superficially or every now and again, sporadically, sorry, I should say, the roots naturally tap down deeper and deeper and deeper to find water. And so it becomes stronger in drought. Now, I take that philosophy of biology and go, well, we're humans, we're a biological species. We have to have stress. So we need that eustress, that beneficial stress. And then if you look at physics, everything in nature, everything in the universe essentially is expanding or contracting. Nothing really stays the same. And expansion is created through pressure. So the two things that most humans avoid, stress and pressure, which essentially means that they're avoiding growth and expansion. Bring on the pressure and bring on the fucking stress, because I will take it every day of the week for maximum expansion and growth.
Yeah. Dude, you just blew the doors off. Hold on. Zach, I'm roping you in. Zach, I know you got to be bubbling with something over there. Zach is the greatest listener on planet Earth.
I don't know. I think my wife would probably either come in first or second, because I'm the talker. She says to me all the time, she's like, I swear you talk in your fucking sleep. And I'm like, she very rarely has anything to say, but when she does, it's normally something pretty intelligent. So, but there was something else just before, Zach. I'd love for you to jump in, but you mentioned something before as well, which I think would be really cool for anyone who's listening. When we're talking about how things have to balance and stabilize, if you look in physics, when an electron and an anti-electron or a positron come together, they form light. Now, part of the theory of how we get these like aha moments is an enlightening moment that the mystics spoke about. That could be where we see a positive and a negative charge as being the same thing. And it does something called collapse a wave function in our brain in order to make us get those aha moments. But it's normally where we realize there's positives to the negatives and negatives to the positives. So it doesn't matter. It's those moments that normally spark that aha moment. You're talking about the person on the front desk doing like this. I think you were like saying it was like a menial job. What I like to do is I like to grab anything that you perceive as a negative or a disadvantage and ask yourself, what are the benefits or what do you gain from doing those things? Because when you do, you start to see it for what it is, not see it through your perceptions as being sort of one-sided. And Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist, spoke about this idea of a shadow. Now, if you go back and you read the great philosophies, they talk about a person who is upright, and they mention the specific term uprighteousness. Now, the difference between uprighteous and self-righteous is a self-righteous person leans to one side, so they have a heavy opinion that leans to one side. But the more you lean to a side, the greater the shadow you cast, which means you have an inability to see it for what it is. Now, when we're uprighteous and we stand upright and we're balanced, we see things for what it is. And so there is really no such thing as a good experience or a bad experience. There is just an experience that we label as being such. And so when you can take an experience and go, right, business sucks, like cash flow is shit at the moment. And you go, okay, well, what are the benefits of shitty cash flow? I get better with my finances. My accounting skills have to increase. I get better at management and leadership. My sales skills have to improve. And then you're like, fuck, this is brilliant because this is setting me up for that next level of expansion. So if you can do that, it keeps you a lot more balanced and mentally stable. The other thing happens as well is when you get elated and excited, you do the same thing. You look at it and you go, what could be the disadvantages? What could be the drawbacks? What do I lose from this? What are the negatives attached with this great positive experience? And you'll stabilize yourself more instead of getting this big elation, which then you have a crash afterwards. So anything that's hyperactive has to have hypoactivity, which is burnout eventually. So whatever goes up has to come back down. It's just a law of nature. So, a law of Earth anyway, we could say.
Dude, see, this is why I said number one motherfucking mindset coach in Australia. That's a whole continent, bitch. All right, we're giving it. Mojo
I need to
done.
get that. I need to get that voice clip, and I'll do a short on my Instagram. So I'll have a short of that number one motherfucking mindset coach in your American accent, and then put that in the back end with a whole bunch of like, B-roll. That'd be sick.
Fuck yeah, dude. We'll get it to you. I promise you that.
Awesome.
Zach, I want to rope you in because we don't want to take too long. I know you got new staff on and everything. So we appreciate your time, Mike. But Zach, I know you got something cooking in there.
Well, I'll just based on like what you were just talking about with the nature of things, I'm really into stoicism, and one of the big parts of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius is understanding the nature of things and people, and not judging it for good or bad. And so I've taken that similar philosophy of just kind of being balanced about things in general. And rather than seeing like, okay, this person treated me badly, air quote badly, now they're a bad person. Well, it's not necessarily true because they were acting within their nature in that moment. It's the same thing as like, would you blame a fig tree for not producing fruit when it's out of season, right? Um, and then to go back to a couple other things that you guys touched on in terms of goal setting and things like that, it reminded me of a quote. I think it was from Elon Musk, where he said, "People overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years." And I was in that same boat where I was like, I gotta make things happen super fast and figure it out because otherwise I don't feel like I'm successful. And then when I seen that quote, a lot of things started connecting in my brain shortly after that. I was like, okay, start maybe thinking about it in a grand scale of, okay, what are the steps to get to that rather than what are the like what are the stepping stones to get to that. So rather than achieving one big goal in a year, I'm achieving one small goal every 6 months or every year and a half to get to the bigger one. And I slowed down the process, and it's so like, I guess a good example of that is, rather than creating a coaching company for my personal training stuff that I'm working on, uh, okay, what is the first step to learning how to be a coach? Okay, well, now I got to take the courses to understand the nutrition and the fitness side, and then look at all the schooling, and then start learning about the business side of it, and then build all of that out instead of doing it all in a year and just stressing myself out, like you said. Slowly piecing it all together has been my biggest, like, I guess, like, stress reliever. And that was like that's my spiel. Anyways.
So you said something really interesting there. Now, because I've been coaching for so long, something that great coaches do really, really well is like I run a lot of courses on communication. And when we're talking about communication, a really important factor is listening for people's values, imbalances, things like that. And so I picked up, you said something about um, not judging yourself for not being successful. For anyone who's listening, I'm not saying this for you, Zach, but for anyone who's listening, if you feel like you're not successful, you have to ask yourself a couple of really powerful questions that will just shred that shit to pieces and will give you a lot more self-worth and you enjoy life a lot more. So the first question you want to ask yourself is, why aren't you successful? And that question normally fucks people up because most people actually don't, they think that they're not successful, but they've never really defined why they're not successful.
Mm.
And then if you ask them to define what success is, the metric on success is normally something in the future that they'll never ever achieve or get to because it's an ideal state. And the problem with a lot of philosophy and even the way humans think is we tend to think in ideals. Like I give shit to people online because I created this terminology called the Jesus complex. And a lot of people online compare me and every other human being to Jesus. And so like I get people online and I'll be talking about wealth creation. And I think I've done all right. Like, you know, I got a 7-figure company. I enjoy life. I'm fairly comfortable if I want to be. And people get on there and they're like, yeah, but you got a shit haircut. Like, what the fuck does that have to do with wealth creation and what I'm talking about? But what happens is they compare you to the ideal because in their own head, it actually says more about them and the way that they live because they compare themselves to this ideal perfect state and there's no such thing. And so like they will compare your inability to walk on water, which means you're incompetent, which means I shouldn't listen to you. But that's everybody. Like they could look at Elon Musk and go, oh, the dude's shit in relationships. Therefore, he's a moron. Instead of going like, okay, this guy has created like one of the greatest companies in history and is one of the greatest entrepreneurs ever. What are some of the great things that he does? And maybe how can we learn and adapt that into our own lives? So the first thing that you've got to do whenever we're talking about success, you have to define why you're not successful if you ever think it, and you've got to really hone in on it. Because some people are like, oh, well, it's because I ate pizza, and I go, okay, does that really mean that someone's not successful? And they go, I guess not. Okay, cool. Then where are we at now? You just really mess with people's heads when they talk about this idea of success, because that comparison is normally an ideal. The second thing is you've got to define success and what it means to you daily. Because if you're not successful daily, you're fucked. Because what I say is that if you believe that you're successful already, the chances of you being more successful is high. If you believe you're a loser, your chances of being a loser are extremely high, because what we reaffirm in ourselves, and you could call it an affirmation, but what we reaffirm in our identity, in our self-talk, in our languaging and all that stuff tends to repeat itself. So if we keep thinking that we fuck everything up and that we're a loser and we make mistakes and we're idiots and stupid, and you keep reinforcing that, the chances that you're going to stay there in 10 years is going to be exactly the same. Well, the chances are high anyway. So we have to really define success. And this is what successful means to me, because I get asked this all the time. People say, you know, what's it like to be a successful person? I say, well, it depends what you mean by successful. I'm successful because I get to live my values. That's it. And if you study the field of axiology, values are physical, tangible things. They're not kindness, happiness, joy, all of that shit. They're not real values. They're ideals. Real values are physical, tangible things that are important to you in your own life that you're able to live and experience daily. My number one value is teaching, learning, and coaching. So right now I'm doing it. I already am successful. I'm living my highest value in life. Then from there, my second highest value is hanging out with people who I call them high value connections and leadership, which is exactly what we're doing here, right? We're having questions to get better in life and to lead ourselves and others better. So my top two values are being achieved right now as I do this podcast. Number 3 is business and wealth creation. Who knows? Someone will probably listen to this, buy one of my products or something in the future. They might jump on and listen to my podcast. I'm already crushing that value as well. And then my fourth highest value is physical fitness and physical appearance. I'm not so much doing that right now, but you know, my eating's been pretty clean today, and I'll probably go hit up a gym session later. So my point is that to me, success is a person living their values. My sister, her highest number one value is being a mum, and she's brilliant at it because she's dedicated to that thing, and so she's extremely gifted at it. She allows herself to be herself, and that is success. I think when people try to be something that they're not and try to live up to other people's expectations or live outside of their own lane in life, or they're not clear on their own values, then they think that success comes in the form of a car or a house or money or something external. But that's bullshit. I've met people who have very little and they're extremely successful because they enjoy life, and to them, life has meaning. I meet people that are extremely rich who hate their life and their life has no meaning. I would not take their life if you paid me. It's crazy. So the more attached we become to these external things, normally the least successful we are, because we've actually lost the idea of success. So I just wanted to share that because you just brought it up, Zach. So I just wanted to sort of go off on a tangent and explain it, because it took me a long, long time to understand that.
No, I love
But
that.
yeah,
That's fantastic. It's a lot
yeah.
to think about.
Yeah,
Dude,
look, I think like success to me is like a little kid tying their shoelace. Man, that kid is fucking successful because he didn't give up. He kept trying. Like, what a champion. You know, learning to ride a push bike. That person is super successful. What is not successful is the person who's sitting there beating themselves up for not being successful, feeling like shit, hating their life, and then wishing that in the future that they were somewhere different, and they're not even here present right now where they can enjoy life. Because as we all know, the only moment that exists is right now. The future is a fucking idea and a dream and a fantasy that we've created inside of our own mind based on who knows what. And then the past is just our own distorted, I guess, fragmentation of our past experiences, which we only store inside of our own mind. There is no past. It's just our own brain. So, and our own thoughts based on the past. So we can change our past based on our thoughts. So, you know, like, to me, if you can just live it, if you can be more present, live your values, enjoy what you're doing at the moment, no matter whether it's an adversity, a challenge, you know, whatever you're going through, if you can sort of work your way and navigate through it, you're a successful person. The trajectory is only up as you keep moving through life. And I think one of you mentioned before about, you know, life being it was a staircase. Sorry, it was a staircase analogy. Um,
The spiral staircase.
That's it. There's a philosopher called Tillard D. Chardin and Vinaski. They spoke about this idea of a noosphere, which is a sphere of mind intelligence. And what it essentially is that our life is just levels and grades. And every level and grade is exactly like school. You have a whole bunch of lessons, and then when you think that you've mastered the lessons, you get a test. That test, if you fail, you repeat the grade, which essentially means that we repeat the same shit over and over again in life until we pass the test. Now, should we pass the test, we break through and we go to the next level. But the next level is a whole bunch of the same shit, right? It's, whether you've got $100 million, $10 million, $1 million, $100 grand, 10 grand, $1,000 or $100, you're going to sit there and go, fuck, I wish I had more money, because you want to grow to that next level. But you can't get there unless you've earned the right by going through the tests. And I remember not being able to pay a $40 phone bill. Now, $40, I probably made $40 just breathing just then, so but that's the challenges I have now is I've got to pay payroll. I got huge amounts of taxation. There's these huge costs that come up, but it's just, I'm still just as stressed as what I was when I was 15 about money, but that's not true. I just handle it differently. I have more stress and financial pressure now. I just handle it differently because I just see it as just being part of the game. So yeah, if we just think of life as being lessons and tests, you crush it.
Dude, you just crushed it. I don't know that we can end this bitch on a better note than that, even though I got some stuff to talk to you about off air. So Michael Mojo motherfucking Johnson, #1 in Australia, soon to be #1 in your motherfucking continent too, okay? So if you don't know, now you know. Mike, go ahead. Is it Michael Mojo Johnson on Instagram as well? And Michael Mojo. No, it's the Mojo Human Resource or Human Institute.
It's just Michael Mojo everywhere. So my website's michaelmojo.com. No one actually calls me Michael Johnson. It's like not since I was at school. Maybe my parents, but everyone just calls me Michael Mojo or Mojo. So Instagram is Michael Mojo _success. So Michael Mojo _success. If you're on any other social platform, just look up Michael Mojo or pop up. And the website is michaelmojo.com. And then my podcast is The Underestimated Entrepreneur as well. I normally drop an episode every day, Monday to Friday, where I just sit there and talk smack about problems in life and business and all of that stuff and give you tips and tools to help you crush it in life. So, yeah.
Well, you got new subscribers, baby. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you have a great rest of your day, because I don't think it's night in Australia right now.
1 o'clock.
Yep. And so everybody over in Australia down under, holla at the Happy Hoodlums if you're in America. All right.